Okay, then we'll go around the room and we'll get started with this. Keep it really simple to begin with. Beginning with you, Phil. It is a pleasure to speak to you. But first things first, how are you doing at the moment?
Well, not too shabby, I'd say. We're 1 week away from the release of Yume, so that's exciting. Um, Currently a little bit sick. Had a little cold the past 2 days, but overall, our plans coming to fruition is something that really keeps me going these days.
Yeah. You have to kind of just work through it, right?
Yes, absolutely. There's no other way.
That is true, absolutely. Have you been particularly found yourself particularly busy in the build up? Because it can be a bit of ups and downs, right? Crazy busy, moments of nothing.
That's true. I mean, we've kept ourselves busy over the course of the last 2 months with a short tour that we had with Siamese throughout Germany and Austria. That was amazing. So very, very thankful to have been on that. And obviously planning the whole album release campaign is also always, that's a
Hmm.
shitload of work. And I'm really happy that Marvin has such a gift when it comes to, creative assets and the whole look and feel of things. So that helps me get through all that.
Okay, well, on that front then, Marvin, tell me, how are you doing at the moment?
Very good, yeah. Still a bit stressful, but yeah, all things happening right now are very positive for us since the album will be out next week, and we've been working for this like, yeah, almost for 3 years now. Not constantly, but it's been 3 years since we found this project, and yeah, the better it feels to have the album out finally.
Well, of course we are, as you said several times, 1 week exactly today as the time of recording, the release of your
Mhm.
debut album, March 8th, via a Rising Empire. So with all that time and all that energy that you put into it, I have to ask you at this stage with 1 week left, Marvin, where is your head at with it? Are you still buoyed and excited? Or is it good? Are you still at that point we just kind of want it out now?
It's a mixture of both, I guess, but I'm very much looking forward to the upcoming weekend because on March 9th we have a release show. So that's the most, yeah, the thing I look up to the most. So
Get it
yeah.
out and get to that release show.
Exactly.
How about you, Phil? Where's your head at with it?
Oh, I'm immensely excited, and we've been waiting for this moment for such a long time that it's kind of hard to grasp that it is around the corner now. Because when we started writing music, it wasn't like, okay, this is going to be Yume, this is going to be our debut album, but instead it was just like, taking one step at a time, and to now have that collection of songs like a proper body of work is always it feels completely different to just, create one piece at a time. So having that and really being able to showcase all the work that we've done in the past 3 years as a whole collection is something that, yeah, we've been striving to achieve for such a long time. So immensely excited, and to add on top to the release party thing, it's actually quite an exciting concept for us because it's not only a release show where you get to hear the album like 4 times in a row, which can get a bit tedious at times. But instead, we're gonna have it's starting a little bit later in the evening, at like 10 p.m. And then
Hmm.
we're gonna have a DJ and a dance floor and all that, and we're actually gonna hop on stage at like 11:30 p.m. and play for like an hour, and then we're back to the DJ thing and celebrating and signing stuff and selling all the beautiful pre-order items that we've created for this album. So yeah, pretty stoked to see how that will go, how people will accept that.
A literal party for once, because release shows and parties are nothing new, but what you've just described is actually an event above just playing the gig.
That's true, and that was really, important to us to create something special for the people from the area that we are from, because it's very, very close to our hometown. I'm from Cologne. It's all Western Germany, and Marvin lives an hour away. So yeah, it's very, very special as all friends and family are gonna attend, and you don't want to let them down.
Hmm.
and they're very familiar with what we do. So you gotta, reach into the trick box and see what what you can make happen.
Oh, fantastic. Talking on a sort of mental and spiritual level more than anything else, what does it kind of mean to you to actually see this album reach the point of being ushered out into the world to walk on its own 2 feet?
It's hard to describe. It's like, how can I say that? Um, Marvin and I had a conversation a couple of months back where we were, trying to come up with a name for the album, because we were like, okay, you know what? We had this slow burn approach to releasing songs, to kind of a thing that you have to do in today's very fast-paced world in order to stay relevant, right?
Mm.
And all the songs are still very, very different to each other. I mean, they have a common DNA, but still every song does its own thing to an extent. And we thought about, common themes or something, a name to tie all this together. And it was really hard to find that. And at some point we, we settled on Yume because it's the Japanese word for dream. And I know it sounds cheesy when I say that, but in our past projects, once we quit these, we didn't really know if we could ever come back to making music a career again. And
Mm.
all those songs have that as a common factor. We wanted to keep that dream alive, and this is the first batch that we managed to create. So imagine, with all this in the back of your head, creating this album and this collection of songs over such a long time. 3 years is a long time. And having a library of like 50 plus ideas that haven't made it onto the album yet. You never know when you're gonna dig out one of these again. But yeah, it's hard to describe in just, a couple of sentences what that means, because it feels like rebirth. It feels like this is the first step to actually bring this project alive, and not only being that act that has like 5 songs out.
There's nothing cheesy about that, is it? The title being a translation to dream, because ultimately it is dream made reality. Everybody dreams of something or another. So the fact that you've been able to do that is simply phenomenal. And I
Thank you.
turn to you now, Marvin, and I want to get your feelings on this becoming a reality.
I honestly don't have that much to add because, yeah, as we just mentioned, 3 years can be a pretty long time, especially if when we started, we didn't even know each other that well. You didn't know where this is all going. And yeah, to just see that it all worked out and having like a milestone, it's like a milestone to have the first or the debut album out. And yeah, jumping on another few tours this year, hopefully playing a few festivals and stuff. Yeah, it just feels like everything makes sense now.
Makes sense. I love that. I love that. Did it though, right? So take me kind of back to the earliest point of the album's creation process. Did you have a vision for what you kind of wanted it to be?
Well, honestly, like when Marvin and I first met, that was under the circumstance of his old band ALAZKA looking for a singer, right? And we had a common friend that referred me. Basically, I gave our common producer a call. I got to audition, and that's basically how we met. And once ALAZKA kind of dissolved, we just kept in touch, and we went on a trip to Norway to kind of figure each other out a little bit
Hmm.
better. And we had our producer with us. That's actually a funny thing, because we've known our producer, our joint producer, for plus now, what is it? It's closer to 15 than to 10 years now. I would say.
Well, I think, I don't know.
Could be. And Marv and I, over like 8 years or something, we never met. We just gave each other the handle of the door. So that was quite interesting.
Hmm.
But starting a new project is not only time consuming, but it's also a financial risk, because this is our career, and if you really want to sink your teeth into something, it has to be under a vision that inspires the both of us long term, and that's not something that you find around lying on the table somewhere. So it was like, yeah, we don't want to do what we did before, but what can we do? Like artists always have that, well, I would say burden to bring something quote unquote new to the table, while that is very, very difficult. And a lot of artists are probably saying that as well. But we wanted to jump in somewhere where we feel there's need for improvement or
Hmm.
even to take things further. And inspired by bands, for example, like Linkin Park, not necessarily musically, but what they did in terms of fuse two different audiences that wouldn't naturally meet, like the hip hop
Hmm.
audience as well as the metal audience. They did that chef's kiss. There's nothing to add. They're legends for a reason. And we thought like we're so much into like artists like Peter Gabriel, Sting, U2, all that. We grew up with that, right? And some of our peers in our age group don't even know who those people are anymore, and that's fine. But it's what made us want to make music, right? So we have that common base. And on the other side, I fell in love with electronic music like 5 years ago, relatively late, if you compare both time frames to each other. Um, and simultaneously, we are really big fans of bands like Nothing But Thieves, for example, but also like Porter Robinson or Madian or the Chainsmokers a lot. And we were just inspired to try and create a gateway between those two worlds, basically between EDM and rock music. Because if you listen to a lot of modern rock music bands, and I don't mean this in any bad way, but most bands that are trying to dive a little bit into the electronic realm, they have a solid rock foundation, the classical lineup of two guitarists, a bassist, a drummer, and do a little bit of electronic flair on top maybe, but it's not a key pillar. And
Hmm.
that's kind of what we're trying to do, to equally create two pillars to base our sound on, and not trying to create one base and just do something on top, but interweave them in a homogeneous way.
I completely understand what you mean. Because often, even a review, say for a rock album that has EDM elements, it'll be that word there, elements in it, rather than a focal point necessarily of it. So completely and utterly makes sense. But for you, Marvin, at what stage did you kind of realize that you had the makings of a full album?
Mm, I don't know. Phil, what do you think? Like maybe when we've been to Athens, when we had like 4 to 5 songs done. But even then, I mean, I think the sixth song we wrote was Willows, and Willows was more or less the first track that where we felt like, okay, the EDM structure or the EDM vision is going to work out with our style, or at least a point where we were happy with.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I would agree on
So
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, when we finished writing half of the album, because we didn't sit down and said, okay, let's write an album. We just wrote songs. And in the end, okay, we got 10 songs. We got a signing to a label, of course. Let's make an album of it. So it's not a, yeah, it's just more or less a collection of songs, to be fair. Yeah. A modern way of releasing an album.
Well, obviously that matters. So that's so important because ultimately, while you want an album to be cohesive, and if you listen to it from beginning to end, it will all flow wonderfully. But also, if everything was cherry picked out of that album and put on a playlist or played on the radio and all that, it would still work. And that is Yume ultimately as well. You brought up the label thing. Obviously, Rising Empire come knocking. Did you have any early trepidation about signing to a label without having an album out or an album ready to go, that kind of thing?
No, at the beginning we were like the first song we released was Wonders,
Mm.
and we already had it uploaded to another distributor to just go the DIY route. So we didn't plan on working with a label, but yeah, last minute we were lucky that last minute a Rising Empire knocked at our door, and so we just took it down and said, okay, let's take some more time and do it properly with them together. Because I previously worked with them for like 4 to 5 years with my previous band. So we already knew each other pretty well, and I think that made things a bit easier.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so individually, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, and we'll start with you, Phil. What were some of the more challenging aspects of the entire creative process for this album for you personally?
Well, honestly, I was used to writing very sad songs, which is kind of a cliche, but there was a moment when I wrote the last album with my old band Time, the Valuator, where I sat down with my dad and we listened to that album in its entirety. And he was, reading the booklet along while listening to the songs. And at the end of it, he was like, he had like glassy eyes, and he was looking at me and he was like, "Son, do we need to talk?" And that was like a waking moment for me where I was like, shit, this is actually pretty dark.
Ah.
And yeah, it was very autobiographical. I wasn't in a good place when I wrote that. And for Floya, it was completely different because everything that we tried to do, like musical concept wise or even individually, was very, very uplifting. And all those dark themed lyrics were no fit for ideas like that. And so when we started writing Wonders, that was where it clicked for me, where I thought like I could actually write more positive lyrics. And that was also a little bit of catharsis to me because, it was self-therapeutic in a way to focus on the positive side of things with writing. But ironically, the first song that we ever wrote was Lights Out, and Lights Out was the most recent song that we released, and that is actually a pretty dark one. I tried
Hmm.
to write positive lyrics to that, and I completely failed at that. It's still a great track, not failed like in terms of quality, but failed like in that sense that I wanted to make it something different. But we felt like it was good as it is, and it didn't actually need those lyrics, those uplifting lyrics. And it's not always about concepts as well, because sometimes it's all about what does the song need, instead of like what kind of nature, what kind of thoughts does the song provoke. And that's the most important thing. What vibe is it trying to convey? And that was kind of difficult for me at first. And if you start out this project or a project like this with some big vision behind it, and you're saying like, yeah, we're going to fuse two audiences, which is, when you're trying to be as original as you can in your limitations, that's always such a big idea, so that no idea really feels like it's up to the vision, like it's on par with what you want to do, like in terms of quality. And that was definitely a way to work it out. And I remember Marv telling me like, yeah, we need to pick some ideas to work out, because if we're not doing that, we're never going to start, because we're not happy with where things are right now.
Hmm.
What we got to lay the first stone, in order to grow where we want this project to be in the long run. And that was quite a challenge, I would say.
On that front, I wonder, like, did you feel now when you reflect on that, do you feel like you put unnecessary pressure on yourself because you wanted to try and write from a more positive angle?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I felt that was necessary for me to keep myself interested. And actually, as I said, it was kind of self-therapy to an
Hmm.
extent. And I was, surrounded by completely different people when we founded Floya, which was also a much needed relief. And yeah, I'd say we always kind of, we're artists, so we always put a lot of pressure on our shoulders. And an artist is like, what, satisfied with a drum beat for 6 seconds a day. So yeah, it's always a little bit about pressure. But something that we learned the hard way basically was, yeah, we're trying to be original, we're trying to be in a just we're trying to put out high quality music, and we're also trying to make a career of this and live off of it. So that's a lot of
Hmm.
pressure involved, a lot of existential problems that need to be taken care of. Um, but it's very easy to lose track of the fun that's involved. If you don't have fun along the way, it becomes tedious and it becomes a job like any other. And that was something where we just, very recently, a couple months ago, looked at each other like, we need to make this more fun again, you know, because it's easy to get lost in the pressure. So I will still say that like the majority, like 80% of that was pure joy, pure bliss, but the other 20% were obviously existing. And so the lesson that I took from that is I really have to remind myself of the fact that this is actually something that I love doing. And,
Mm.
especially in an industry that is as tough as this, it's so vital to remind yourself that you're fortunate that you get to do this.
Well said. A lot of that easier said than done, but hell, you got to try, right? Marvin, then, what about you? What were some of your more challenging moments, aspects from the entire creative process?
I'd say not to repeat Phil in terms of pressure, which definitely was the most challenging thing for both of us in the same way, I'd say. Of course, everyone had both of us had his individual problems with it, but in the end, it's just the financial existence thing. I'd say the other thing that's still the most challenging until today is finding the right placement for this band because
Hmm.
we're in between both two worlds, which is like the EDM world, if you want to call it like that, and the rock, or some people, or like the fan base of our label, A Rising Empire, would say the metalcore world even. And these are three very, very different worlds. And yeah, still, as I said, until today, it's not so easy to find our place in the
Hmm.
industry because people from the rock world say, okay, it's a bit, or from the metalcore and rock world say it's a bit too poppy, it's a bit too light, it's not heavy enough. And the people from the electronic scene or from the pop world that also plays on radios and stations and stuff say, it's too heavy, it's too hard, and yeah. But of course, as Phil mentioned, like Linkin Park being this kind of gateway band between those worlds, I think patience is what counts the most here. So,
Do
but
you
that's
find it?
definitely a challenging point for us.
Oh, for sure. Do you find it frustrating that you have to be labeled as a specific genre,
I hate that.
regardless whether you want to be?
I hate that being labeled because it's just the music. Either people enjoy it or they don't.
Oh, it's so simple.
Yeah.
It should be so simple, but ultimately it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Continue with you, Marvin. Did you have any lines in the sand, to use that term, when it came to creativity on this album? Sorry, elements that you knew weren't going to be part of the Yume soundscape because either you didn't feel too comfortable or you didn't think it worked for what you were trying to do.
Mm, I mean, things that were definitely for sure from the very start is that we still wanted to have pretty heavy guitar solos, which is unfortunately a thing that's not too common nowadays.
Hmm.
I mean, you can even do radio edits and still keep solos pretty short, but at least you have some interesting guitar playing. But apart from that, from the rock foundation to speak, so I think, yeah, the electronic world. I mean, like as Phil also mentioned, the Chainsmokers, which was definitely a big inspiration because they also most of the time play live with a drummer who
Mhm.
brings the energy into the set that I personally need. I honestly wouldn't be able to visit just a show with only DJs playing because, yeah, I think I'm too much of a rock guitarist to be not bored by that. No offense at all, but yeah, bringing that in and then coming to the conclusion that being a duo gives us this ultimate freedom
Hmm.
that we probably wouldn't have if we looked out for another guitarist, for another bassist, and stuff like that. Because I mean, of course, you can experiment with different sounds for all those individual instruments, but it would be different because right now we can just pick any electronic synth sound for a guitar, for a bass if we need it, and can just go with that instead of, yeah, put your head in against the wall and be like, okay, how do we do this live? Yeah, we don't
Hmm.
have this issue. It's playback, obviously, but yeah, it's only Phil the drummer and me live. So, which are the focus points, of course, as well.
It is ultimately about what you want to create. It's refreshing to hear that, because obviously there's so much pressure to do things a certain way, to lean into a certain way. And I've heard the album, I'm very aware of it, and there's so much to gain from having an open mind, particularly when you're looking at a wide array of genres. So from your own stance, what do you get from having this open mind and willingness to experiment and try to marry different genres?
I'll just jump in here and say that it's a very egotistical thing to say, maybe, but we do what we do because we try and keep ourselves interested, you know, trying to make ourselves happy first and foremost. So having that freedom to basically do whatever we want, and not having, as Marv mentioned, like a classical rock lineup where you have to give everybody something to do. We could just do a song where it's just, I don't know, a cappella vocals if we feel like it. Or if it's just Marv and a reverb pedal and he's just noodling around and nobody cares if there's no one else in the room, or you get my point probably. But it's like, yeah, I don't think I have anything to add here.
Do you feel like it's always going to be so important that let's say 10, 15, 20, however many years into the future, that this thought process, this view you currently hold, needs to stay?
I would say so, yes. I'm pretty certain. I mean, there's a very, very interesting YouTuber that I like. His name is Venus Theory. And he recently, like a couple of weeks ago, he made a video called Art in the Age of Content. And that's also something that is kind of falling in line with your question, because he's like, you know, reflecting on the things that he wants to do, and he's a YouTuber, right? He's handling gear and all that, and you know, tries to introduce his audience to new synths and all that stuff that he does. But at heart, he's a musician, and does YouTube videos basically, and he actually takes care of these products in a way that his output isn't as fast as the standard maybe. And people approach him and tell him, dude, it's just a YouTube video, just upload it so that something is there. And that's something where he said, I just hate that with every fiber of my being. Like, because it's something that I create, and if I create something and put it out, I want it to be a part of me. I want to identify with that as much as I can, and not view it as just a piece that I'm throwing on the web to stay relevant. So that kind of ties in when I hear a question like that for me.
The comparison, two different worlds, but it's still art in different forms. And obviously art is so subjective, and it can come from so many different areas. So starting with you first, Marvin, aside from music, is there a specific area that you often look for inspiration? And have you been surprised recently by something that actually inspired you?
Hard to tell.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I'm not that much into, yeah, films and stuff. So I think music definitely is taking most of my time. No matter if it's like work for Floya or writing songs or whatever, or
But
just,
dude,
yeah.
Dune 2 is out now. We got to go to the cinema, you know that.
Fabulous. What about you then, Phil? What have you had anything in recently around you that outside of the music that's potentially inspired you?
I mean, like I said, like Dune is like my favorite franchise of all time, starting from the books to the fantastic adaptation of Denis Villeneuve. That is always inspiring, especially considering that I went to the cinema with my girlfriend yesterday, and when everybody walked out, I was still tied to my seat because I was mesmerized at what Hans Zimmer managed to produce yet again. I know it's not a surprise. It's like Hans Zimmer and he's doing his thing, right? But he's like the modern Mozart to me. You know, he's the Mozart of our time.
Yeah.
And his approach to making music is so inspiring. You know, I think for me it's like I'm the opposite to Marv. I'm a big movie fan, and if there's well-written music that ties in with the audio with the video aspect, and that forms a homogeneous mixture, that is, these two things combined are so much more powerful than the individual parts, if that makes sense. You know, I feel like music on its own is very powerful, but tied together with video footage that really encompasses what is happening musically, that's just, there's nothing that could complement each other more. So that's always a source of inspiration for me.
Is that something you've taken into or tried to take into your own music videos and how you showcase the images?
It's difficult to answer this in just a sentence, but there's always, you know, Marv and I, we are used to generating ideas that are way out of our budget line, which is probably something that a lot of artists have to deal with.
That's the struggle our videographer has to deal with.
Oh yes, oh yes. We're always like delivering these grand concepts, and he's like, guys, I have no idea how I can realize that with the amount that we have at our disposal. But it for us, and particularly for me, I think it's important to tell the story of what happens on the audio, and you know, try to amplify the music by giving it a face, because that's what you do with a music video, right? Every song that you do a music video to creates a face, something that you know, sometimes for me it's like that. If I listen to an album or a song that has a music video, I see that music video the second I press play. It's just engraved then. So yeah, that's that.
I hear you. Got vision, bit more money, and then would really see what you can bloody do, basically. I love it. But of course, I mean, although this might be your debut album, it's no secret that you've had some pretty damn impressive stats, the boring side of making music, the your streams, your numbers, and all that aspect. Can you put your finger on a reason as to why your music up to this point has resonated so severely with so many people across the world?
I think so, to an extent, it's because we have a very loyal fan base that also supported our previous projects, and they have kind of picked up that we are doing something new again. And I feel like although we aren't really metalcore or progressive metal anymore in any way, there are still elements in our music that might help people of heavy music to connect with it more or easier, basically. Because for example, the drum grooves that we have, a lot of these choices could also be present in a metalcore track. But it then again, you know, Marv's clean funk guitars on that, and me not screaming, for example, make it a little bit, you know, more on the poppier rock side of the spectrum. So there's a lot for people that are used to heavy music or interested in heavy music, that is still kind of embedded into what we do. While it might not be so obvious, but if you're looking for something, you will find something. I believe.
Very interesting. What about you, Marvin? Have you got another reason as to why people are playing, listening?
I mean, yeah, apart from the previous fans that we were fortunate enough to bring at least some of them into Floya, I don't know, I'd say a mixture of good marketing, also coming from a rising empire, having a big base as followers on their socials. But yeah, everything else is hard to tell. I mean, to be very honest, we were surprised too about the numbers that songs like The Hymn or even Wonders, for example, have on Spotify. Like, yeah, it's crazy. So can't really
Yeah.
100% pinpoint that.
Yeah, and I don't think you ever really will because, there's so many different factors that come into it. I like to always try and keep it super simple when I listen to the music and I try to understand as to why is this? It often comes down to one word for me and it's accessibility. And I think of all the people around the world, of all the people who listen to different music and how they listen to it, if this track or this album could be played in a room full of all those people, would everybody, regardless of their tastes, potentially move, dance, tap their feet? And if I think, yeah, they would, that's my answer.
Something that I want to add to that is Marv and I discovered a band like 2 weeks ago, maybe, and they're called Moxie, the band, and a phenomenal album. They have like 20,000 listeners on Spotify, and oh my God, the vocals are so on point. It's been a long time since I was last fascinated by a full album that much. And that always, mirrors the fact that it's not always about high quality music, but marketing is such a big side of it. And sometimes you just can't help but scratch your head, like, why isn't this band like so famous? Yeah, so I'm trying to give them a shout in everything that I say. Like, check out
No,
Moxie the band; they're really, really incredible. They had like one tour with Dayseeker, but I don't think that a lot of people know about them.
no, I mean, I don't recognize the name at all. I guess as well, we should also throw in this. Sometimes just luck, a little bit of luck sometimes helps.
That's true.
Okay, we're gonna have to come to the end soon because we're 40 minutes in, but I've got one more question that I'd love to get both your opinions on. Starting with you first, Marvin. What do you hope listeners take from Yume?
Pure emotions that we put into, that we hope to, that I hope that transfer to the listeners, to give a pretty short, but I think that's the most important thing. To move
Absolutely.
people emotionally.
Can't disagree with that. How about you, Phil?
Honestly, we've been asked not the same question, but something similar, and that made me think, and I think I found a solution for myself, and that is, I have never put as much happiness into a body of work as I did with this album. So if I had one word to describe this, it's happiness. And that is what I want to give to all the listeners that are out there that are hopefully going to find this album somewhat appealing. And it's just very, very easy to focus on the things that don't work. But sometimes, you just got to focus on the things that do and be grateful that they are working. So this is basically in a nutshell what this album is about.
I absolutely love that. I don't want to blow smoke up your butt, so to speak, but ultimately I expect huge things. I know huge things will come from Yume because I can see its appeal to so many different people. I'm a metalhead at my core, but I also like to think I've got an open mind, and I have thoroughly enjoyed so much of what comes in this album. And I can see that being the case with so many different people, particularly your heart and soul. That's what's really notable, is you can feel the effort and time and, all the things that you needed to do to put in this album. It's there, but it's also out on March 8th via A Rising Empire. So make sure you check it out. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you so much, Carl.
Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to see more content like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It is gratefully appreciated. You can find us over at gbhbl.com, our full website, where reviews, news, and so much more goes up daily. We're also on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, at GBHBL. Just search for GBHBL and you will find us out there. We also have merchandise on sale. You can access the shop via the website.